The stagecoach rattled into Genoa, Nevada territory, on a blistering August afternoon in 1862, and Vincent Monroe stood waiting with his hat in his hands, watching a woman step down who would change everything he thought he knew about beauty. Her name was Winifred Graham, and she moved with careful precision, one gloved hand holding her traveling cloak closed at the throat despite the oppressive heat. Vincent had exchanged letters with her for 6 months, ever since his sister Martha had convinced him that a ranch this size needed a woman's touch, and that he needed companionship more than he needed his stubborn pride. The letters had been proper, polite, revealing just enough about each other to make the arrangement seem reasonable. She had written that she was 24, educated, and willing to work hard. She had mentioned she was leaving Philadelphia because circumstances had made staying impossible. He had written back about his ranch, his cattle, the wild beauty of Nevada territory. He had mentioned he was 28, alone except for his hired hands, and honest to a fault. What neither of them had mentioned in those carefully penned letters was now impossible to ignore. As Winifred stepped fully into the sunlight, a gust of wind caught her cloak and pulled it open. Her dress was modest, high-necked and long-sleeved despite the summer heat, but her hands were ungloved now as she reached to steady herself against the stagecoach. The left hand was marked with burned scars that twisted from her fingers up past her wrist, disappearing beneath the fabric of her sleeve. When she turned her face toward him, he saw that the scarring continued up the left side of her neck, creeping onto her jawline and cheek, pulling the skin tight in places, creating a landscape of healed tissue that spoke of terrible pain survived. Vincent watched several townspeople turn to stare, watched Mrs. Henderson whisper something to her daughter, watched the stagecoach driver avert his eyes with discomfort. Something hot and protective flared in Vincent's chest, something that made him stride forward with his hand extended and his voice warm. "Miss Graham," he said, meeting her eyes directly. They were gray, those eyes, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they held a wariness that made his heart ache. "I'm Vincent Monroe. Welcome to Genoa." She hesitated before placing her scarred hand in his. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and cultured, with just a tremor of uncertainty beneath. "Mr. Monroe, thank you for meeting me. I apologize for the delay. We had trouble with a wheel outside of Carson City." He held her hand a moment longer than strictly necessary, his thumb brushing across the ridged skin without flinching. "No apology needed. I'm just glad you're here safe." He gestured toward the wagon he'd brought. "Let me get your trunk. The ranch is about an hour's ride north." As he loaded her single battered trunk onto the wagon, he was aware of her watching him, trying to gauge his reaction. He'd seen burns before. His father had died in a barn fire when Vincent was 16, and he'd pulled 2 of their horses out of that inferno with his own hands blistering from the heat. He knew what fire could do, knew the courage it took to survive it and keep living. The ride out to the ranch was quiet at first. Winifred sat stiffly beside him on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the Sierra Nevada mountains rose up in stark beauty against the cloudless sky. The land here was different from the East, he knew. Harsh in some ways, unforgiving in others, but possessed of a wild loveliness that he'd come to love in the 5 years since he'd established his claim. "It's beautiful," she said finally, and he heard genuine appreciation in her voice. "Your letters described it well, but seeing it is different." "Wait until sunset," he said. "The whole sky turns colors you wouldn't believe." He paused, then added carefully, "Miss Graham, I want you to know that we can take things slow. Martha, my sister, she lives in town with her husband, but she's prepared a room for you at the ranch house." separate from mine. I know this arrangement is unconventional and I want you to feel comfortable." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and he saw surprise in those gray eyes. "That's kind of you, Mr. Monroe, Vincent," he said. "And it's not kindness, it's respect." They fell silent again, but it was a different quality of silence now, less strained. The wagon rolled through sage and grassland, past scattered pine trees and granite outcroppings. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace. Vincent pointed out landmarks as they went. The creek that ran year-round, fed by snowmelt from the mountains. The stand of cottonwoods that marked the northern boundary of his property. The meadow where he planned to plant hay next spring. "How much land do you have?" she asked. 320 acres, he said with quiet pride. "I filed a homestead claim in '57, proved it up, then bought out my neighbor when he decided Nevada winters were too harsh for his constitution. I run about 200 head of cattle, some horses. It's not a fortune, but it's honest work and it's mine." "Ours," she said softly, then seemed startled by her own words. "I mean if we marry as we discussed." "Ours," he agreed and smiled at her. "I believe in partnership, Miss Graham. I'm not looking for a servant. I'm looking for a wife, a true partner." Her expression shifted, something vulnerable and hopeful flickering across her scarred face. "You should know," she said, her words coming faster now as if she needed to speak them before courage failed her, "that the scarring is extensive. It covers much of my left side, from my hand up my arm, across my shoulder and chest, up my neck to my face. There was a fire in the factory where I worked in Philadelphia. 3 years ago. 12 women died. I survived, but I was burned badly." Vincent kept his eyes on the road, giving her the privacy to speak without his gaze on her. "I'm sorry you went through that." "The man I was engaged to at the time," she continued, her voice flat now, emotionless in the way of someone recounting a pain too deep for tears, "broke our engagement when he saw the extent of the scarring. His mother said it would be unseemly, that I would frighten children, that I was no longer suitable to be the wife of a banker. After that, I found that many people agreed with her assessment. I could not find decent work. People would hire me and then let me go within days, uncomfortable with how I looked. When I saw your advertisement for a mail-order bride, I thought perhaps in the West, where life is harder, people might be less concerned with superficial matters. But I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I understand if you wish to reconsider our arrangement. I have enough money for a ticket back east." Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop. They were on a rise now, overlooking a valley where his ranch house stood, a solid structure of logs and stone with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. Beyond it, cattle grazed in the golden afternoon light. He turned to face Winifred fully. "Miss Graham," he said, "may I be completely honest with you?" She nodded, her jaw tight as if bracing for rejection. "When I saw you step off that stage, my first thought was that you were brave. My second thought was that you were beautiful. And my third thought was that any man fool enough to let you go because of some scars wasn't worthy of you in the first place." Her eyes widened, and he saw them begin to shine with unshed tears. "I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of saint," he continued. "I'm a rancher, Miss Graham. I work with my hands. I've got scars of my own, some you can see and some you can't. My father burned to death when I was 16, and I still wake up sometimes from nightmares about that day. I'm not educated like you are. I can read and write and cipher well enough, but I never had much formal schooling. What I am is honest and hardworking, and I give you my word that I will never treat you as anything less than you deserve." A tear spilled over and ran down her scarred cheek. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you be so kind to someone you don't even know?" "Because kindness costs nothing and means everything," he said simply. "And because I want to know you, Winifred. I want to know if you like your coffee black or with cream. I want to know what makes you laugh. I want to know what you dream about when you're not dreaming nightmares. I want to build a life with someone who understands that what matters isn't what you look like, but who you are." She wiped at her eyes with her scarred hand, and Vincent pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. She took it with a shaky laugh. "I'm sorry. I promised myself I wouldn't cry." "Tears aren't weakness," he said. "They're proof you're still feeling things, still living. That takes strength." He clicked his tongue at the horses, and they started moving again, down the slope toward the ranch. As they drew closer, Winifred sat up straighter, taking in the details of what would be her new home. The house was larger than she'd expected, with a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. Gardens had been started but clearly needed tending. The barn was well maintained, and she could see horses in the corral beyond it. "It needs a woman's touch," Vincent admitted as they pulled up to the house. "I've been focused on the livestock and the land, and I'm afraid the house has suffered for it. But it's solid and weatherproof, and there's room to grow." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady at her waist, and carried her trunk up onto the porch. The door was unlocked, he explained, because out here they didn't have much worry about theft. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Inside, the house was dim and cool after the brightness outside. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean for a bachelor household. "I've got 2 hired hands who live in the bunkhouse," Vincent explained, setting her trunk down. "Tom Whitaker and Samuel Chen. Good men, both of them. They usually eat supper with me, but I sent them into town today to give you time to settle in. I'll introduce you tomorrow." He gestured to the doors. "That's my room, that's the spare room that's yours, and there's a small washroom through there. Not fancy, but functional." He showed her to her room, which was modest but comfortable, with a real bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Someone had put fresh sheets on the bed and placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. "Martha came by yesterday to help me prepare," Vincent said, seeing her notice the flowers. "She's excited to meet you. Fair warning, she can be a bit overwhelming, but she means well." Winifred touched the wildflowers gently. "It's lovely, thank you." "I'll let you rest and freshen up," he said, backing toward the door. "There's water in the pitcher there, and I'll heat more if you want a proper wash. Take your time. We'll have supper whenever you're ready." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Winifred sat on the bed and let herself feel the weight of the day. She had been terrified on that stagecoach, terrified that she would arrive and see disgust or pity in Vincent Monroe's eyes, terrified that she would have to endure yet another rejection and find her way back east with the last of her savings gone and no prospects waiting. Instead, she had found something she had stopped believing existed: genuine acceptance. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's Bible on the dresser beside the wildflowers. Then she poured water into the basin and carefully removed her traveling cloak and dress. The scarring was indeed extensive, as she had told Vincent. It covered her left hand, her arm, curved across her collarbone and chest, and reached up her neck to her face. The skin was tight and ridged in places, smooth and discolored in others, a permanent map of the worst day of her life. She had been working at the textile factory to help support her widowed mother, one of dozens of young women tending the machines in the hot, lint-filled air. When the fire started, it had spread with terrifying speed, fed by fabric and oil and wood. She remembered the screaming, the choking smoke, the heat so intense it felt like being pressed against a stove. She had been trying to help another girl get free when a burning beam had fallen, pinning them both. The other girl had died. Winifred had lived, but with burns that covered nearly a quarter of her body. The pain had been indescribable, worse even than the fire itself. Weeks in the hospital, skin raw and weeping, infections that nearly killed her, endless treatments that hurt almost as much as the initial injury. And then the slow realization that she was no longer the person she had been before, that people looked at her differently now, that doors that had been open were suddenly closed. She washed carefully, then put on a fresh dress, this one a simple calico in deep blue. It was still long-sleeved, still high-necked, but at least it was clean. She brushed out her dark hair and pinned it up, then studied her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. The scarring was visible no matter what she wore, a constant reminder that she was damaged. But Vincent's words echoed in her mind. Beautiful, he had said. Brave, he had said. Maybe here in this wild place so far from everything she had known, she could learn to believe him. When she emerged from her room, she found Vincent in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as he worked at the stove. The smell of cooking meat and coffee filled the air. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Good timing," he said. "I hope you like steak. It's about the extent of my cooking skills, but we've got beef in abundance." "It smells wonderful," she said honestly. "Can I help?" "Do you know how to make biscuits? I can never get them right." She did, and it felt good to have something useful to do with her hands. They worked together in companionable silence, and Winifred found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected. Vincent moved with easy competence, clearly comfortable in his own space, and he made room for her without fuss or fanfare. They ate at the simple wooden table, and Vincent told her more about the ranch, about his plans for the future, about the challenges of ranching in Nevada territory. She told him about Philadelphia, about growing up in the city, about learning to read from her schoolteacher mother. The conversation flowed naturally, and she found herself laughing at his dry observations about some of his neighbors. After supper, Vincent suggested they sit on the porch to watch the sunset he had promised her. He was right. The sky transformed into layers of gold and pink and deep purple, the mountains turning into dark silhouettes against the fading light. It was more beautiful than anything she had seen in years of city life. "Vincent," she said as they sat in the wooden chairs he had built himself, "why haven't you married before now? You have land, a successful ranch, you're kind and honest. Surely there have been women interested." He was quiet for a moment, watching the last of the light fade. "There was someone," he said finally, "before I came here, back in Missouri. Her name was Catherine. We were planning to marry, but she died of cholera before we could. That was in '56. After that, I needed to get away, needed to start fresh. I came out here and threw myself into building this place. Martha followed a year later with her husband. She's been after me to find someone for years now, but I guess I wasn't ready until recently." "I'm sorry about Catherine," Winifred said softly. "It was a long time ago," he said. "And I've learned that life moves forward whether we're ready or not. The question is whether we move with it or let it leave us behind." They sat in silence as the stars began to appear, more stars than Winifred had ever seen in her life, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. The night air was cooling quickly now, carrying the scent of sage and pine. "What do you want, Winifred?" Vincent asked. "From this life, I mean, what are you hoping for?" It was a question no one had asked her in a long time. She considered it carefully. "I want to be useful," she said. "I want to work hard and see the results of that work." I want to wake up without being afraid of what people will say when they see me. I want a home where I belong." She paused, then added quietly, "I want to be loved for who I am, scars and all, not in spite of them, but as part of the whole person I am." "That seems like a reasonable thing to want," Vincent said. He stood and moved to stand at the porch railing, looking out at the dark land. "I can't promise that every day will be easy. This life is hard sometimes. The winters are cold, the summers are hot, and there's always work to be done. But I can promise that you'll be respected here, you'll be valued, and if you give me a chance, I'll do my best to give you the love you're looking for." Winifred rose and came to stand beside him. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I'm afraid of hoping again and being disappointed." "Fear is natural," he said, "but so is hope. Maybe we can be afraid and hopeful together." She looked up at him in the starlight, at his weathered face and kind eyes, and made a decision. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." Over the following days, Winifred began to settle into life at the ranch. Martha came to visit on the third day, riding out with her husband Jacob and a wagon full of supplies and what she called necessities for civilized living. Martha was a tornado of energy, a year younger than Vincent, with the same dark hair and blue eyes, talking a mile a minute as she swept into the house and immediately began reorganizing things. "Vincent, this kitchen is a disgrace," she announced, though her tone was affectionate. "Winifred, thank goodness you're here. Maybe you can bring some order to this chaos." Despite her overwhelming nature, Martha's warmth was genuine. She embraced Winifred without hesitation, and if she noticed the scarring, she gave no sign that it mattered to her. "I'm so glad Vincent finally found someone," Martha said as they worked together to sort through the supplies. Jacob had taken Vincent out to look at some horses, giving the women time together. "He's been alone too long, brooding around this ranch like some kind of hermit. He needs someone to remind him there's more to life than cattle and hay crops." "He's been very kind to me," Winifred said carefully. "Kind is what Vincent is," Martha agreed. "But don't mistake kind for soft. He's got iron in him when he needs it, same as our father did." "Speaking of which, has he told you how our parents died?" "He mentioned his father died in a fire." Martha nodded, her expression growing somber. "Barn fire in Missouri. Father went back in to save the horses and the whole structure came down on him. Vincent tried to go in after him, burned his hands badly doing it. Mother died 2 years later. Just gave up, I think. She loved Father so much that without him, she didn't want to keep going. That's when Vincent decided to come west to start over. I think he needed to get away from all those memories. That must have been terrible for both of you." "It was," Martha said simply. "But we survived and Vincent built something good out here. Now maybe he can have some happiness too. You both can." The hired hands, Tom and Samuel, returned that evening. Tom Whitaker was a lanky man in his early 40s with sun-weathered skin and a taciturn manner. Samuel Chen was younger, perhaps 30, with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to navigate a world that was not always welcoming to Chinese immigrants. Both men treated Winifred with careful courtesy, and she sensed that Vincent had spoken to them about respecting her. Supper that night was lively, with Martha keeping up a steady stream of conversation and Jacob, a quiet man who owned the mercantile in town, occasionally interjecting wry observations. Tom and Samuel ate quickly and excused themselves back to the bunkhouse, but not before Tom mentioned that a cow was having trouble calving and Vincent might want to check on her later. After Martha and Jacob left, Vincent did indeed go out to the barn and Winifred followed without asking permission. She had grown up in the city, but she was not squeamish and she wanted to be useful. The cow was a young one, her first calf, and she was struggling. Vincent examined her carefully, his movements gentle and sure. "Calf's turned wrong," he said. "I'm going to have to help turn it." He glanced at Winifred. "This might be unpleasant to watch. I'm not delicate," she said firmly. "Tell me what to do." He did, and she followed his instructions, holding the lantern steady while he worked. It was hard, messy work, and the cow bellowed her distress, but Vincent was patient and skilled. Finally, the calf came, slithering out in a rush of fluid, and after a moment that seemed to last forever, it shook its head and took its first breath. Vincent sat back on his heels, his arms bloody to the elbows, his face showing relief. "Good job, Mama," he told the cow, who was already licking her calf clean. He looked up at Winifred. "Thank you. You didn't have to help, but I appreciate it." "I want to be part of this life," she said. "That means helping with everything, not just the pretty parts." He smiled at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "You're something special, Winifred Graham." They walked back to the house together in the darkness, Vincent stopping at the pump to wash his arms clean. Winifred worked the pump handle for him, and when he was clean, he caught her hand in his. "I know we said we would take things slow," he said, "but I want you to know that every day I'm more certain that you coming here was the best thing that could have happened to me." "I feel the same," she whispered. He lifted her scarred hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "Beautiful," he said. "Every part of you." 2 weeks passed and they fell into a rhythm. Winifred took over the cooking and the garden, planted herbs near the kitchen door, and began making curtains for the windows. Vincent worked the cattle and horses, mended fences, and planned for the winter. They ate meals together, worked side by side, and in the evenings they talked on the porch until the stars came out. There was a growing tenderness between them, a deepening understanding that transcended the practical arrangement they had started with. Vincent would touch her hand when he passed her, or tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Winifred found herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the competence in his hands, the kindness in his eyes. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Vincent turned to her with unusual seriousness. "Winifred, we've been together for almost 3 weeks now, and I don't want to rush you, but I need to know your feelings. Do you think you could be happy here? Truly happy?" "I am happy here," she said honestly. "Happier than I've been in years. Then I have a question to ask you, and I want you to know you can say no without any fear that I'll send you away. This is your home now, regardless." He took her scarred hand in both of his. "Will you marry me?" "Not because of an arrangement, not because it's practical, but because I've come to care for you deeply and I want to spend my life with you." Her heart felt too full for her chest. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and kissed her with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. It was her first kiss, she realized, the banker back in Philadelphia having never kissed her before their engagement ended. This was sweetness and promise and hope all at once. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to make you happy," he promised. "I'm going to spend every day showing you how much you mean to me." "You already do," she whispered. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony in Genoa, with Martha as witness and the town's circuit preacher presiding. Winifred wore her best dress, and Martha had made her a crown of wildflowers for her hair. Vincent wore a new shirt that Martha had insisted he buy for the occasion, and when he saw Winifred coming toward him, his face lit up with such joy that several women in the small crowd sighed. The ceremony was brief, the words simple but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her in front of everyone, a clear declaration that he was proud to be her husband. If anyone in the crowd had misgivings about her scarring, They kept silent in the face of Vincent's obvious devotion. Martha threw a small celebration at her house afterward, with cake and punch and music from a fiddler who lived on the edge of town. Vincent danced with his new wife, holding her close and whispering in her ear that she was the most beautiful woman there. Winifred, who had never expected to dance at her own wedding, felt as if she were floating. That night, they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Vincent carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and set her down gently in their home. Their home, she thought. Not his, not hers, but theirs together. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly as they stood in the main room, the lamps casting warm light around them. "A little," she admitted. That is, I don't know what to expect." "Neither do I entirely," he said, "but we'll figure it out together. And Winifred, I want you to know that you're perfect to me. Every single part of you." He led her to his room, which was now their room, and lit the lamp on the bedside table. Then, with infinite tenderness, he began to help her with the buttons of her dress. She tensed despite herself, waiting for the moment when he would see the full extent of the scarring and recoil. But when her dress fell away, revealing the twisted skin of her arm and shoulder, the way the burn spread across her chest and back, Vincent did not flinch. Instead, he traced the paths of the scars with his fingertips, his touch reverent. "You survived," he said quietly. "You survived something terrible, and you're still here, still strong, still you. These scars are proof of your strength, Winifred. They're beautiful because they're part of you, and you are beautiful." Then, one by one, he kissed the scars. He kissed her scarred hand, each finger, the twisted skin of her wrist and arm. He kissed her shoulder, her collarbone, the scars that spread across her chest. He kissed her neck, her jaw, the scarring on her cheek, and with each kiss he whispered, "Beautiful. You are so beautiful." Winifred wept, but they were tears of healing, of release, of being seen, truly seen and accepted completely. When Vincent made love to her that night, it was with such tenderness and care that she understood, finally, what it meant to be cherished. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arms around her. "I love you," she whispered. "I didn't expect to, not so quickly, but I do. I love you, Vincent Monroe." "I love you too, Winifred Monroe," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I think I started loving you the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach with your head held high, refusing to be ashamed of who you are." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Brave and terrified are not opposites," he said. "Some of the bravest people I know are scared most of the time. They just don't let it stop them." They talked late into the night, sharing histories and hopes, fears and dreams. Vincent told her about Catherine, about the guilt he'd carried that he hadn't been able to save his father, about the loneliness of the past few years. Winifred told him about the fire, about the pain of recovery, about her mother's death from pneumonia 2 years ago, about the desperation that had finally driven her to answer a mail-order bride advertisement. "I'm glad you answered my advertisement," Vincent said. "I'm glad you were brave enough to come here." "I'm glad you were kind enough to see past the scars," she replied. "I don't see past them," he corrected gently. "I see them as part of you, part of your story. You don't have to hide them from me, Winifred, not ever." It was a gift beyond price, that acceptance, and Winifred held it close to her heart. The months that followed were full of hard work and growing love. Autumn came to Nevada territory with crisp mornings and golden aspens in the mountains. Winifred proved herself capable and willing, learning to manage the chickens Vincent bought at her request, tending the garden with skill learned from her mother, preserving vegetables and fruits for the winter. She also revealed an unexpected talent for handling horses, and Vincent began teaching her to ride. The first time she sat on a horse, she was nervous, but Vincent led the gentle mare around the corral patiently, until Winifred relaxed into the rhythm of the animal's movement. Within weeks, she was riding well enough to accompany Vincent around the ranch, and she loved the freedom it gave her, the ability to see the land from horseback. They worked together to prepare for winter, cutting wood, repairing the barn roof, moving the cattle to better grazing. Tom and Samuel became friends as well as employees, often joining Vincent and Winifred for supper and staying to play cards or just talk. Samuel taught Winifred some Chinese phrases, and she discovered he had a dry sense of humor that surprised her. Tom, despite his taciturn nature, proved to be an excellent storyteller when the mood struck him, regaling them with tales of his years working on various ranches across the West. Martha visited regularly, and she and Winifred became close friends. Martha was pregnant with her second child, and she confided to Winifred that she was glad her brother had finally found happiness. "I worried about him," Martha said one afternoon as they sat together mending clothes. "After Catherine died and then Mother, I thought he might just close himself off entirely. But you've brought him back to life, Winifred. You've given him something to care about beyond just survival." "He's given me the same," Winifred said. "I didn't realize how small my life had become, how much I had retreated into myself. Here, I feel like I can breathe again." Winter came hard and fast to the Sierra Nevada. The first major snow fell in November, transforming the landscape into a white wilderness. Vincent had prepared well, and they had plenty of supplies laid in, but it was still a shock for Winifred to see the world buried under feet of snow, to feel the bite of cold that went down to the bone. But there was beauty in it too. The house stayed warm with the big fireplace, and in the evenings, Vincent would read aloud while Winifred sewed or knitted. They played checkers and cards, told stories, made plans for the spring. And at night, in their bed with quilts piled high, they kept each other warm and loved each other with growing passion and tenderness. It was during one of those deep winter nights, with a blizzard howling outside, that Vincent traced the scars on Winifred's shoulder and said something that had been on his mind. "Tell me about the day of the fire," he said softly. "You've mentioned it, but you've never told me the whole story." She was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. She told him about working at the factory, about the meager wages that were still necessary to help support her mother, about the dangerous conditions that everyone knew about but no one addressed because the workers were all women and could be easily replaced. She told him about the smell of smoke, the panic, the stampede for the doors. She told him about seeing the other girl, a 14-year-old named Mary, trapped under a fallen beam. "Everyone else was running," Winifred said, her voice distant with memory, "and I could hear Mary screaming. I couldn't just leave her, so I went back. I tried to lift the beam, but I wasn't strong enough, and then something else fell, something burning, and it pinned us both. The pain was so intense that I thought I would die from it alone. I remember screaming, remember the smell of my own flesh burning. And then someone pulled me out, a fireman. He got me out, but by the time he went back for Mary, it was too late." Vincent held her tighter. "You tried to save her, you risked your life. But she died anyway," Winifred said. "And sometimes I think about how I survived and she didn't, and it doesn't seem fair." "Life isn't fair," Vincent agreed, "but your surviving doesn't diminish her death. You both mattered. You both deserve to live. The tragedy is that she didn't, not that you did." "The factory owner was never held responsible," Winifred continued. "The doors had been locked from the outside to prevent workers from taking breaks. 12 women died because he wanted to squeeze a few more minutes of labor out of us. But he had money and influence, and nothing ever came of the investigation." "That's a terrible injustice," Vincent said, anger clear in his voice. "It is," Winifred agreed. "But being angry didn't bring anyone back. It didn't heal my scars or give me my old life back. Eventually, I had to decide whether to let the anger consume me or to find a way forward. I chose to move forward, even though I didn't know where I was going. And somehow, I ended up here with you. I'm grateful you did, Vincent said. And I'm grateful you were brave that day, even though it cost you so much. That girl Mary might have died alone in terror if you hadn't gone back. Instead, she died with someone trying to help her, someone willing to sacrifice for her. That matters, Winifred. That matters more than you know. She turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring into it all the love and gratitude she felt for his understanding, for his acceptance. He returned the kiss with matching intensity, and they made love slowly, tenderly, a reaffirmation of life and love in the midst of the winter darkness. Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted, the creeks ran high with runoff, and the land greened up. Winifred discovered she was pregnant in April, and Vincent was overjoyed. He became even more protective than usual, insisting she not lift heavy things, that she rest more, that she let him do more of the work. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested, but she was touched by his concern. Martha, now the mother of a second daughter, gave Winifred advice and reassurance. "Vincent will worry," she said, "because that's what Monroe men do. Our father was the same way when Mother was expecting, but don't let him turn you into an invalid. You're strong and your body knows what to do." The summer was busy with work, preparing the ranch for another winter and getting ready for the baby. Vincent converted the spare room into a nursery, building a cradle with his own hands and carving it with birds and flowers. Winifred sewed baby clothes and blankets, and Martha contributed a bassinet that her own children had used. In late October, as the aspens turned gold again and the air grew crisp, Winifred went into labor. Martha came to help, and a midwife from town rode out despite the distance. Vincent paced the main room, worried sick, while Winifred labored in their bedroom. It was a long labor, nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Vincent thought he couldn't bear it, hearing her cries of pain through the door. But Martha came out periodically to reassure him that everything was progressing normally, that Winifred was strong. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, he heard a different sound, the cry of a baby. Martha opened the door, her face exhausted but jubilant. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful son, and Winifred is fine. Tired, but fine." Vincent rushed into the room. Winifred lay in the bed, sweaty and pale but smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. The midwife was cleaning up efficiently, and Martha hovered nearby, but Vincent only had eyes for his wife and child. "A son," Winifred said softly. "Vincent, we have a son." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the infant's red, wrinkled face. The baby had stopped crying and was making small snuffling sounds, his tiny fist waving near his face. Vincent felt his eyes fill with tears. "He's perfect," Vincent said. "You're perfect. Winifred, I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered. She looked down at their son. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the previous months, but now that the baby was here, Vincent said, "James, after my father. James Vincent Monroe." "James," Winifred repeated, testing the name. "I like that. Hello, James. Welcome to the world." The baby squinted up at them, and Vincent carefully touched his son's tiny hand. The fingers wrapped around Vincent's thumb with surprising strength, and he felt his heart expand with a love so intense it was almost painful. "I promise I'll be a good father to you," Vincent whispered to his son. "I promise I'll protect you and teach you and love you every day of your life." The weeks after James's birth were exhausting but joyful. Winifred recovered well, And Vincent proved to be a devoted father, waking with her in the night to help with the baby, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor with James when he was fussy. Tom and Samuel were equally enchanted with the baby, and even taciturn Tom would smile when James grasped his finger. As winter settled in again, the Monroe family stayed warm and safe in their home. Winifred would sit by the fire nursing James while Vincent read aloud or worked on tack repairs. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep, marveling at the life they had created together. One evening, when James was 3 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Vincent and Winifred sat together on the porch wrapped in heavy coats, watching the stars. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked. It was a question he asked periodically, as if he needed reassurance that this life was truly what she wanted. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Winifred said. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was hoping for acceptance, maybe for a place to belong. I never expected to find this much love, this much joy." "I feel the same," Vincent said. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed of having, a real partner, a family, a home that's full of life and laughter." "And you've given me back myself," Winifred said. "You've made me feel beautiful again, made me believe that I'm more than my scars. That's a gift beyond measure." Vincent kissed her temple. "You are so much more than your scars. You're brave and kind and strong. You're an amazing mother and an incredible partner. You're everything I could ever want." They sat in silence for a while, then Winifred said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that factory fire, about all those women who died, and I wonder if there's something we could do, some way to honor their memory. What are you thinking? What if we took some of our profits and donated them to causes that help working women? Maybe supporting better working conditions, or education for poor girls who might otherwise end up in dangerous factories." Vincent considered this. "I think that's a fine idea. We're not rich, but we're comfortable enough to help others, and it would be a good way to make something positive out of tragedy." "I'd like to do it in Mary's name," Winifred said. "The girl who died. She was 14 years old and supporting her family. She deserved so much better than she got." "Then we'll do it in her name," Vincent agreed. "We'll call it the Mary Fund and we'll help other girls like her." True to their word, the Monroes began donating a portion of their income to causes supporting working women. Martha helped spread the word, and other ranchers and business owners in the area began contributing as well. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it helped several young women get education or training that allowed them to escape desperate situations. The years passed with the rhythms of ranch life. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. When he was 2 years old, Winifred became pregnant again, and in the spring of 1866, she gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine Martha, after both of Vincent's lost loves. Catherine was a delicate baby with blonde hair that mystified them both until Martha reminded them that their mother had been blonde. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters, dry summers, cattle that died from disease, and the constant work of maintaining a ranch. But the Monroes faced these challenges together, supporting each other through difficulties. As the children grew, they absorbed their parents' values. James learned from an early age that his mother's scars were simply part of who she was, neither something to be ashamed of nor something that defined her. Catherine grew up fierce and independent, confident in her parents' love. Both children learned to work hard, to treat others with respect, and to measure people by their character rather than their appearance. Vincent remained as devoted to Winifred as he had been from the beginning. He still called her beautiful, still kissed her scars with reverence, still looked at her with love clear in his eyes. And Winifred, who had once believed she would never be loved, flourished under his devotion. Her confidence grew, and she became known in Genoa as a woman of strength and compassion, someone who could be counted on to help those in need. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, bringing more people and commerce to Nevada, the Monroe's ranch benefited from the increased market for beef. They expanded their operation, hiring more hands and buying more land. Vincent insisted that Winifred be a full partner in all decisions, and her business acumen, learned from years of managing a household on limited means, proved invaluable. Tom Whitaker remained with them for many years, eventually building his own small cabin on Monroe land and settling down with a widow from town. Samuel Chen saved his wages and eventually bought his own plot of land south of the Monroe Ranch, and he and Vincent remained close friends, often helping each other with large projects. Martha's children grew up alongside the Monroe children, and the cousins were as close as siblings. Jacob's mercantile prospered, and Martha finally stopped worrying about her brother, seeing that he had built the life he deserved. By 1875, when James was 10 and Catherine was 7, the Monroe Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory. But success had not changed the core of who Vincent and Winifred were. They remained hardworking, humble, generous with those who had less, and deeply devoted to each other. One evening that summer, they stood together on the porch watching their children play in the yard. James was teaching Catherine to rope a practice post, and her determination to master the skill made them both smile. "You ever regret it?" Winifred asked. "Choosing a mail-order bride sight unseen, taking such a risk?" Vincent turned to her with surprise. "Not for one single second." "Winifred, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. These past 13 years have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she said. "I used to think that fire destroyed my life, and in some ways it did. It took away the future I thought I would have. But it also led me here to you, to this life, and I wouldn't trade this for anything." Vincent pulled her into his arms and kissed her soundly, to the delighted giggles of their children. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers in the gesture that had become their trademark. "You are beautiful," he said, as he had said 1,000 times before. "Every scar, every line, every part of you, beautiful and brave and mine." "Yours," she agreed. "Always yours, and you are mine." "Always," he promised. The children called for their attention, and they broke apart to join in the game. As the sun set over the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the Monroe family laughed and played together, surrounded by the land they loved and the life they had built together. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. Nevada achieved statehood in 1864, and the Monroe family witnessed the transformation of the territory into something more settled, more civilized, though the wild beauty that had first drawn Vincent remained. In 1878, when Winifred was 40, she became pregnant unexpectedly with their third child. It was a surprise, as Catherine was now 12 and they had assumed their family was complete, but it was a welcome one. Martha, now a mother of 5 herself, teased Vincent that he clearly had not learned restraint in his old age, though at 44, Vincent was hardly old. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Winifred was older, and her body had been through much in her life. But she was determined, and with Martha's support and a good doctor from Carson City, whom Vincent paid handsomely to attend her, she delivered a healthy baby girl in early winter. They named her Grace, because that is what she was, unexpected grace, a gift they had not anticipated but treasured deeply. James, now nearly 14, was protective of his new sister. Catherine, at 12, was fascinated by the baby and spent hours helping her mother care for Grace. The house was full of life and noise and love. Vincent, holding his new daughter for the first time, marveled again at the wonder of life. "3 children," he said to Winifred. "You've given me 3 beautiful children and 15 years of happiness. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Winifred said. "When 2 broken people found each other and discovered they could make something whole together." "You were never broken," Vincent said firmly. "Scarred, yes, but scars are not breaks, they're proof of healing." It was a conversation they had had before, but one that never grew old. Winifred had long since come to peace with her scars, but she still appreciated Vincent's perspective, his insistence on reframing the narrative. As Grace grew, she proved to be the most spirited of the Monroe children, fearless and adventurous in a way that kept her parents on their toes. James grew into a serious, responsible young man who loved the ranch and planned to take it over from his father eventually. Catherine developed a love of books and learning, and though she also loved the ranch, she spoke of perhaps becoming a teacher someday. The Monroe family became pillars of the Genoa community. They hosted barn dances, contributed to the building of a new school, and were known for their generosity to those in need. The Mary Fund, which they had started years earlier, had grown through contributions from others, and had helped dozens of young women get education and training. Winifred, despite her scars, never hid herself. She wore her high-necked dresses not from shame but simply from preference, and if people stared, she met their eyes calmly. She had learned that her worth was not determined by her appearance, that she was valuable because of who she was. A loving mother, a devoted wife, a capable businesswoman, a compassionate friend. Vincent's love never wavered. He still reached for her hand when they walked, still kissed her scars when they were alone, still told her she was beautiful. After 2 decades together, they had the comfortable intimacy of a long marriage combined with a romantic devotion that had not dimmed. By 1885, the Monroe children were grown. James, at 21, was running much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. He had married a local girl, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they were expecting their first child. The prospect of becoming grandparents delighted both Vincent and Winifred. Catherine, at 19, had indeed become a teacher, working at the school in Genoa and boarding with Martha during the school week. She was courting a young lawyer who had recently opened a practice in town, and wedding plans were in the works. Grace, at 7, was still very much a child, bringing energy and laughter to the house that might otherwise have felt too empty with the older children gone. One evening in late summer, as Vincent and Winifred sat on the porch watching the sunset, they reflected on the life they had built. 23 years, Winifred said. "It hardly seems possible. Sometimes I still remember that day when I stepped off the stagecoach, so scared and uncertain." "I remember it too," Vincent said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen. I still think that. You changed my life, Vincent Monroe. You changed mine right back, Winifred Monroe." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Winifred said, "Do you remember the day you first kissed my scars? Really kissed them, I mean, when we were married?" "Of course. It was important to me that you knew I meant what I said, that I truly saw you as beautiful." "You gave me back myself that day," Winifred said softly. "You gave me permission to stop hiding, to stop being ashamed. You loved me so completely that I could finally love myself." Vincent took her scarred hand and raised it to his lips, kissing it as he had done countless times before. "Beautiful," he said. "Still beautiful, always beautiful." "I love you," she said, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, he said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The years moved on. James and his wife had 3 children, making Vincent and Winifred doting grandparents. Catherine married her lawyer and moved to Carson City, though she visited frequently. Grace grew into a strong, independent young woman who had ambitions of attending college in California, a possibility that would have been unthinkable for a woman a generation earlier. Vincent and Winifred aged together gracefully. His hair went silver, and her face gained lines, but to each other, they remained as attractive as they had been in their youth. The love between them, if anything, deepened with time, maturing into something rich and complex and unshakable. By 1895, Vincent was 61 and Winifred was 57. They had been married for 33 years and had built a legacy that extended far beyond their ranch. James was running the ranch successfully and expanding it further. Catherine and her husband were active in politics, fighting for women's suffrage and labor reforms. Grace, at 17, was preparing to leave for college, the first woman in the family to pursue higher education. The Mary Fund, started all those years ago in memory of a girl who died in a factory fire, had helped hundreds of women and had inspired similar funds in other communities. It was not a famous charity, but it had made a real difference, and that mattered to Winifred. One spring evening, Vincent and Winifred walked out to a favorite spot on their land, a rise overlooking the valley where they could see the ranch spread out below them and the mountains rising in the distance. They had walked here countless times over the years, but it never grew old. "This is where I want to be buried," Vincent said suddenly. "When my time comes, right here where I can look over everything we built." "Don't talk about dying," Winifred said, though her voice was gentle rather than scolding. "You're healthy as a horse." "I'm 61, love. I'm not planning on dying anytime soon, but a man thinks about these things. And I want you to know that when I do go, I'll go happy, knowing I spent my life well." "We'll be buried here together," Winifred said firmly. "Side by side like we've been in life." "Side by side," Vincent agreed. He pulled her close. "You know, I've been thinking about writing down our story, about how we met, how we built this life. I think it's a story worth preserving." "For the grandchildren?" Winifred asked. "For them and maybe for others. I think there are probably other people out there who feel broken or damaged, who think they're not worthy of love. Maybe our story could give them hope." "Then write it," Winifred said. "Write it all down, the good and the bad, the scars and the healing. Write about how love can transform everything." Vincent did write it over the following year, laboriously penning their story in the evenings after the ranch work was done. It was not a literary masterpiece, but it was honest and heartfelt, a testament to the power of acceptance and love. He gave copies to each of their children and kept the original in a safe place. The turn of the century found the Monroe family still thriving. Vincent was 65, Winifred 61, and both were still active and healthy. They had 8 grandchildren now, with more on the way. The ranch was prosperous, the family was happy, and the life they had built together continued to flourish. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1902, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Martha, now 72 and still spry despite her years, helped organize the party. All 3 of the Monroe children were there with their families, and friends from miles around came to celebrate with the couple who had become an institution in Genoa. At the height of the celebration, Vincent stood up to make a speech. His hair was white now, his face weathered by years of sun and wind, but his eyes were still bright and his voice was still strong. 40 years ago, he said, a scared young woman stepped off a stagecoach in Genoa. She had burned scars that covered much of her body, and she had been told by the world that those scars made her unworthy of love. But when I saw her, I saw the bravest, most beautiful person I had ever met. And I'm here to tell you that these past 40 years have proven me right. Winifred Monroe is brave and beautiful, and she has made me the happiest man alive. He turned to Winifred, who was crying openly now. I love you, he said simply. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end. You are and have always been beautiful to me. The crowd applauded, but Vincent was not finished. He knelt, with some difficulty given his age, and took Winifred's scarred hand. Then, in front of everyone they loved, he kissed each of her fingers, kissed her wrist, kissed the scars that ran up her arm. Beautiful, he said, loud enough for all to hear. Every single part of her is beautiful. There was not a dry eye in the gathering. Their children and grandchildren, their friends and neighbors, all witnessed this declaration of enduring love, and many later said it was the most romantic thing they had ever seen. Winifred pulled Vincent to his feet and kissed him, to cheers and applause. I love you, Vincent Monroe, she said. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me love and family and a place in the world. You gave me everything. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. The Monroe grandchildren would later remember it as one of the best days of their childhood, a day when the whole world seemed full of joy and love. Vincent Monroe lived to be 73, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1907. He was buried on the rise overlooking the ranch as he had wanted, with a simple stone that read, Vincent Monroe, beloved husband and father, 1834 to 1907. But his real legacy was not in the stone. It was in the ranch that continued to thrive under James's management, in the children and grandchildren who carried on his values, in the lives that had been touched by his kindness and generosity. Winifred lived another 8 years, surrounded by family and love. She remained active, helping with the grandchildren, working in her garden, continuing to support the Mary Fund. She spoke often of Vincent, keeping his memory alive, but she was not consumed by grief. He would not have wanted that. Instead, she lived fully as he would have wished, finding joy where she could and sharing love generously. When she died in 1915 at the age of 77, she was buried beside Vincent on the rise, her stone reading, Winifred Monroe, beloved wife and mother, 1838 to 1915. Between the two stones, their children placed a third marker with a simple inscription, Together forever, as in life. The Monroe Ranch continued through the generations. James's son, named Vincent for his grandfather, took over when James retired, and he in turn passed it to his own children. The family tradition of hard work, honesty, and compassion continued, shaped by the example that Vincent and Winifred had set all those years ago. Catherine's descendants became teachers and lawyers and advocates for justice, carrying on Winifred's commitment to helping those who could not help themselves. Grace's children became doctors and engineers and scientists, pushing boundaries and pursuing knowledge with the fearlessness she had embodied. The Mary Fund continued to operate for decades, helping generations of women find education and opportunity. Eventually, it merged with larger organizations doing similar work, but the name was preserved, ensuring that the memory of a 14-year-old factory girl who had died too young would not be forgotten. And the story that Vincent had written, the story of how a mail-order bride with burned scars had arrived in Nevada territory and found love with a lonely rancher, was passed down through the family, preserved and cherished. It became a family treasure, a reminder that love is not about perfection but about acceptance, that beauty is not skin deep but soul deep, that the bravest thing anyone can do is to risk being seen truly and completely. Years turned into decades, and decades into a century. The world changed dramatically. The Wild West was tamed, then mythologized. Nevada grew from a territory into a state, from a frontier into something modern and developed. Genoa, which had been a rough frontier town when Winifred arrived, became a historical landmark, a tourist destination for those interested in Old West history. But among the Monroe descendants, the story remained fresh and relevant. Great-great-grandchildren would read Vincent's handwritten account and be moved by the simple honesty of it, by the clear love that shone through every page. They would look at the old photographs, faded and sepia-toned, and see Vincent and Winifred, their faces serious as photography demanded but their hands clasped together, telling their own story of connection and love. The photographs showed Winifred's scars clearly. She had never hidden them, and the camera captured them faithfully. But those who looked at the photographs in later years, who knew the story, could see past the scars to the woman herself. They could see the strength in her bearing, the peace in her expression, the contentment of a woman who had been loved completely and had loved completely in return. One photograph in particular became a family favorite. It had been taken on that 40th anniversary celebration, showing Vincent kneeling before Winifred, kissing her scarred hand, while she looked down at him with such tenderness that it made the heart ache. It was a photograph that captured a moment of pure love, a visual representation of everything their marriage had been. The ranch eventually passed out of the direct Monroe line, sold to someone else who would care for the land, but the family kept the rise where Vincent and Winifred were buried. It became a family tradition to visit on special occasions, to stand at those graves and remember the love story that had started it all. And always, those who visited would repeat the words that had become a family motto, words that Vincent had said countless times over 40 years of marriage. Beautiful. You are beautiful. Because that was the real legacy of Vincent and Winifred Monroe. Not the ranch, not the land, not even the merry fund, important as it was. The real legacy was the lesson they taught by living it. That love sees past the surface to the soul, that scars are marks of survival, not shame, that beauty is found in courage and kindness and the willingness to see another person truly. Their story became more than just a family tale. Eventually, a great-great-granddaughter who had become a historian wrote a book about them, based on Vincent's original account and family records. The book was not a bestseller, but it found its audience, people who needed to hear that they were worthy of love, that their scars, visible or invisible, did not define them or limit them. Letters came from readers around the country, people who had been moved by the story. A woman with facial scars from a car accident wrote to say that reading about Winifred had given her the courage to stop hiding. A man who had felt unworthy of love because of his past wrote that Vincent's acceptance had inspired him to believe in second chances. A teenage girl with a disability wrote that the story had helped her understand that she deserved to be loved just as she was. The story rippled out across time and distance, touching lives in ways that Vincent and Winifred could never have imagined when they first met on that hot August day in 1862. What had started as two lonely people taking a chance on each other had become something larger, a testament to the transformative power of love and acceptance. And on that rise in Nevada, where the Sierra Nevada mountains still stood as eternal witnesses, and the wind still carried the scent of sage and pine, two simple stones marked the resting place of a man who had known how to see beauty in unexpected places and a woman who had been brave enough to believe him when he told her she was beautiful. Together forever, as in life. It was the perfect ending to a perfect love story, a love story that had begun with a mail-order bride arriving with burned scars and a cowboy who kissed everyone and called her beautiful. A love story that proved that the best romances are not about physical perfection, but about two souls recognizing each other and choosing to build a life together, come what may. And in the end, that is what mattered. Not the scars or the struggles, not the hardships or the obstacles, but the choice they made every day to love each other fully, completely, and without reservation. It was a choice that had created a legacy of love that endured long after they were gone, inspiring generations to believe in the possibility of finding someone who would love them exactly as they were. Their story was a reminder that the best love stories are not fairy tales but real stories about real people who choose love despite fear, who choose acceptance despite prejudice, who choose to see beauty where the world sees flaws. Vincent and Winifred Monroe lived that love story, and in living it, they left the world a little better than they found it. And that, more than anything, was their true happily ever after, a love that lasted a lifetime and then echoed down through the generations, touching hearts and changing lives, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt unworthy of love. They proved that everyone is worthy, that love does not demand perfection but offers grace, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the bravest steps and the kindest words. Beautiful. You are beautiful. Those words, spoken with absolute sincerity by a cowboy to his mail-order bride on a ranch in Nevada over a century ago, still resonated with truth and power. Because love, real love, sees beauty in scars, finds strength in vulnerability, and creates forever from a single moment of connection. And that is a truth that never grows old, never becomes outdated, never loses its power to transform lives and heal hearts. The Monroe family carried that truth forward into the future, generation after generation, ensuring that the love story of Vincent and Winifred would never be forgotten, would always serve as inspiration, would always remind people that love, true love, sees past the surface to the soul and finds it beautiful beyond measure.